All right, let's move ahead in the program. Joining me right now is Esiri Agbeyi, who is the PwC partner and the family business leader. Hello, Esiri. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Hi, and good to have you on the show. We're looking at strategies for building family wealth. And let me start by saying, they say money can't buy you happiness, isn't it? But money can buy you comfort and the good things of life and give you options. So I'd rather be in a vacation home in Bali or in the Bahamas, not happy, than being in a hut somewhere I don't have food to eat, not happy, isn't it?
Same
So,
here.
yeah. So let me start by asking, what does generational wealth mean or family wealth? What does it mean?
I think in simple terms, and what people generally understand it to mean is just passing on wealth from one generation to the next, starting with the founding generation who probably created that wealth. But what some of the misconceptions you then have is whether that wealth needs to be passed on within the same asset type or structure, legal structure, or even business name. So several and decades ago or centuries ago, because this is a science, family business,
Mm.
right? Centuries ago, the success of family businesses were dictated by whether or not the family name continued. But I think over time, that has transcended to then mean whether the wealth itself is transformed within the same family. So you could have that you started off or founded the business doing agriculture or manufacturing, and somewhere along the line, a next generation member decides that, oh, I'd like to invest in digital assets now because cryptocurrency is the in thing, and then as long as that wealth is protected and not lost, then you can allude to some generational wealth being transferred.
Mm. Okay, you've brought up the issue of crypto, and I'll come back to it later in terms of technology, especially this time. I hope there'll be time for that. But my next question to you is a bit personal. Since we're talking about family wealth and generational wealth, did you receive money advice from your parents, for example, or how much of it did you receive? Because if we're talking about family wealth, it really starts from the home. It really starts from there, isn't it? How much money advice did you receive from your family? And I also do know that even before you started working at PwC, before you got that job offer, you were doing some things. Can you please share? I think you were selling stuff on the street or something.
That's you want me to share all those my rugged moves that I was making then. But yes, I did get advice from my parents at the time, coming from school. And my dad and my mom were very simple people. My mom was a teacher. My dad, fortunately, was an accountant working
Mm.
with big organizations. And he was also a trainer. So he was training people as well. And I think I'm following in his path
Mm.
too. So one of the key things I learned from him was really around financial literacy and just the basics in accounts. I was a science student. I aced all my, exams and everything. I did science wonderfully well. But at the time I left school, there really was no job. And some of the questions that I then started to ask myself is how could I then sustain myself, and not really rely on my parents. And what I sought to do at the time was basically my passion, which was around baking. And I would bake and then sell on the streets. And fortunately for me, I'll call their name out because I absolutely love them. Mutual Fund, some top guy in mutual fund stopped by me and he's like, "Oh, I'd buy all your cakes," and takes me to their office, and they bought all my cakes. And since then, I just continued. And at the same time, I was working on a very underpaid, I would say, employment position I had with my mom's school. So I was paid 8,000 naira, and I was actually teaching primary school five, teaching them maths and all those very tough subjects. But I did it with glee and joy, and following from then, I landed with the PwC job. So I pretty much was prepped with my dad as well, just teaching me the basics on accounting, debit and credit, which I cried about because I thought there was no hypothesis to what a debit and credit transaction was coming from science. But I mean, that was really very helpful to get me started and embracing that job in PwC.
You know what, Siri, sometimes it's good to really personalize some of these things that we talk about or some of those things that you teach so that people can actually relate and let it not be so theoretical. I see that we both share a lot of things in common. You talking right now. I know that even when I was growing up, we had piggy banks in my house. Then we could find the coins. They are nowhere to be found now, and we dropped those coins. And it was always a very huge satisfaction on our part as let's open it and see how much is in it. I know you said you're a science student, you study microbiology. I study parasitology, so I don't even know what I'm doing here. I should be part of those chasing COVID. but, but, we're, but we're here. The other thing that also resonated with me, which you talked about, was you started teaching and you were being paid 8,000 naira. Esiri, after secondary school, I was a teacher. I started teaching too. I taught in a primary school and I was teaching nursery 2 students at a time and I was being paid 1,500 naira. So, you know, so I just needed to bring in that to tell our viewers that it's not really about, you've got to start somewhere, isn't it? There should be a foundation. That was why I asked you earlier in terms of the kind of money advice or the kind of money lessons you got, even if not from home, but along the way. Do you have anything to say about that before we move forward?
Okay, to share some of the advice I got, right?
Yes. Do you have any other thing to say?
Oh yes, yes, yes. I think one of the key things, because I would, if I were going to categorize my dad, I probably would put him in the safe investor, the one that doesn't like to take any risk, and he just wants to be sure that his obligations are fully met when due. So my dad would save every single time for the next holiday or the next school fees that was coming up. He would save 2 years in advance, and he'll keep that. Unfortunately, I don't have that type of discipline as my dad. I'm somewhere midway. But I try to compensate that by saying perhaps I need to look out for other asset types that I can invest in and not just rely on employment. But then that also has its ups and its downs. You know, it doesn't come without risk. So I guess it's really identifying what level of risk you can accommodate. You don't want to make money and then have a high blood pressure just making the money and then use that money to save yourself or even die in the midst of doing so. So, but one of the critical things would be depending on what your risk profile might be, it might just be that you want to start saving first. And then the next line you could then go to would be investing in safe and secure type assets. And this could range from short term securities, fixed income securities like treasury bills or even federal government bonds because they have strong backing of the sovereign. And so you don't expect to go wrong there. Saving as well obviously will give you some points, but not so much. Not so much. Being wealthy, on the other hand, is quite different. And being wealthy means that you do need to take risks. And if we go through all of the top men who are wealthy and women who are wealthy, they would also recount some of those risks that they've taken. So somewhere along the line, as you journey along, you would have those ups and downs where you probably invest in assets and then you lose, you learn your lesson, and then you move ahead. And I think it's just staying true to that journey that then differentiates the one man from the other, and also being exposed and not also seizing opportunities as well. So read, learn, increase that literacy. Not all of what you need to be wealthy stays in school or you can get in school. Being on the streets and also understanding what's going on around and not closing your ears to those is also very important. And just being very selective about what choices you make. Again, depending on your risk profile, also very important. And at the start of this program, I'd mentioned something about cryptos. That's become a big thing now. We're even talking about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and everyone is trying to wrap their minds around it. But some people have taken leaps and bounds already and are beginning to already make significant returns on those. But again, it must depend on your risk profiling, which is what you must do. But as much as possible, always set aside something for the rainy day, and also consider that there might be more assets other than where you currently are that can be invested in.
Mm. Okay, Esiri, you talking about family wealth, it needs to start from home, isn't it? And that was why I asked you those questions around your upbringing and your background, if you did inherit some of your money behavior right now from home. How do you think, and I still want to stick with it, how do you think that couples that are watching this show now, or families or husband and wives that are watching this show now, even children that are watching this show now, how can we begin to normalize money discussions at home? How can couples, how can parents begin to teach their children, some kind of money lessons, and how wealth can be built as well as transferred? Because I've also heard some people say, the only legacy I can give to my children is education. All my money, I'm going to spend it. I'm going to, if I have houses, I'll sell everything. I've given my child an education. Let that child go hustle.
Yeah, and I guess it's still going back to the basics and trying to simulate some of that basics within the home environment. For instance, where there are chores to be done, you can actually start to think about how to reward kids as well for doing extra in the house. Like sometimes my brother will come to the house and he'll ask the kids and say, "Oh, I need someone to clear this room, and this is the extra that you will get," because he's trying to build in them that semblance of I do work, but I also get reward. And those are some of the things as well that parents can start to think about. The other thing as well is just around financial literacy. There's a whole lot of lessons now that are going online around coding. You know, parents want their children to understand technology as much as they can because we're in a digital age. The same applies to financial literacy. The absolute truth is that there is no occupation or business that does not come back to money matters. So at the end of the day, if your children are not also embracing that subject, they would be disadvantaged. Is one of the reasons why we also find that in the entertainment industry, as an example, you find people and creatives with so much talent, but at the end, they're probably not interested in the business side of things, and they leave that sometimes to managers to do on their behalf. And some way along the line, maybe many years later, you find that they're asking for contributions online for their ill health. And this is something that we probably need to start to address from the grassroots. If we can't change the curriculum in schools, private schools should definitely embrace it, public schools as well, definitely. But in the absence of that, parents need to take advantage of free lessons. There's so many lessons on board. I started by reading Rich Dad Poor
Dad.
Dad as well at some point, just to expose myself to some of these nuances. I think it's time that parents also read and try to translate that knowledge to their kids, and take up free lessons, take up paid lessons as well, just so that they know that. And they're not only developing their art, but they're also developing the science of money.
Mm. I like the dimension, the science. There's a science and there's an art to it, really, and both has to be learned. Now let's come back to, or let's come to the basics now. For people that do not have a clue and they want to have a clue, what are the key steps or what practical steps can you tell my viewers today on how to build generational or family wealth?
Aha, that is a very big, big topic, but I'll try to start from somewhere small. One of the key things we have and assets we have in Nigeria, absolutely by significant miles, is the entrepreneurial ability that our citizens have. And what you then see is that in the to the extent that there are any gaps or problems in society, you very easily see people rise up to say, I will try to solve it, which is why you see a lot of people on the streets trying to sell. Once there's traffic, they know, oh, there's a problem here. These people would not be eating at this point in time. It lends itself to innovation somewhat, even though we are leaps and bounds behind when it comes to generating new technology. But we are also making those strides. We're still trying to solve basic needs at this level, but we still see some people that are rising to the top and making good out of this whole chaos. And that can be said for the tech companies, which received a lot of VC funding. last year and even 2 years before. Now, having said that, there are structures that you then need to add on to that entrepreneurial passion beyond just having that innate ability to make money. It's how do I sustain that money and make it last for generations? This is where family business advising comes in. And some of it goes through to the structures that you put in place from the legal entity that you set up to do the business. And I'll give a very quick example here. A lot of people start off businesses and they quickly rush to the CAC and register a company limited by shares. And then over time, you find that they are not filing the necessary returns. They don't even know what they're exposed to when they register those companies. They don't know the tax implications of those companies that they've registered. But immediately another idea comes up, another company has been set up. So we've seen instances where we've gone into family businesses and you see a plethora of companies that have been set up based on the idea that had been that had flourished at the time. That is usually and typically a wrong move. Another issue that you then see as well may be in the legal structure. What decision do you make? How do you choose? Should I be limited by shares? Should I be set up as a partnership? Should I be set up as a cooperative? There are different structure types that you have there, and all of them have their tax implications. Another thing as well that I think a lot of people don't bear in mind is just that sense of accountability and transparency. When you start your business, most times it's easy and very quick. Those are the advantages to make your decisions, to take flight and to go run. But what you then don't have the advantage of is external advice. And more often than not, even you as an individual must have your own personal board that you're accountable to. Because sometimes, for instance, we started the year, we said, oh, I want to lose 4 kg or 10 kg before the year runs out. I have this goal for fitness. But then you lose the track along the line. And it's just those accountability partners that you put in place. Within a corporate structure, you call that your board of directors. A lot of people set up companies but don't have they have the slightest clue about the governance structures that need to be put in place. And that's some of the areas where we see gaps. Why not have a board of directors that you can be accountable to, that you can look up to, that can look internally and even give you external advice from other boards that they have represented? Another thing too we see is the lack of family governance structures. And it might sound like a very weird term because if I go back in time to the survey we did last year, 2021, PwC conducts a survey biannually on family businesses. So we have a lot of data gathered on these family businesses. What we found is that 50% of family businesses do not have any succession plan in place. Globally, the percentage is about 21%. So it means that we are not doing as well as our counterparts outside the country. What it then asks, the big question it then asks is, or begs, is what are those structures that we do not have that we should have? And it all hovers around family governance. Most times you will hear things like, oh, the founder has passed on, and then there's squabble or dispute within either the business itself or even within the family. We've had scenarios, in fact, notable families in Nigeria where they thought they had put in place the right structures, such as wills. But then those wills were disputed in court. The assets are frozen. No one is able to utilize them. Another very key issue with the lack of estate planning as well in the midst of this is the fact that you're not even prepared for some of the probate duties that may be assessed at the time those assets will be administered by the court. So in Nigeria, as an example, there's a 10% levy that would apply when those assets are to be administered. If you are rich in real estate, illiquid assets, the 10%, how would it be financed by the children? You haven't thought about it before as the owner of the family business, and then you pass on, and then that person is left with a burden. They probably would say, oh, I don't know how to finance that. And then the assets are not handed over to them. So the assets waste away. We have this kind of scenarios going on and on. And with that statistic that says only 50% have even started to put those governance structures in place, it means a lot of family businesses in Nigeria can do better, absolutely better, if we have those family governance structures. And just to even put it in perspective, What are the type of companies that we're even referring to as family businesses? It's all these SMEs, all of them rising up to the big companies we have that are churning out millions of dollars. Walmart, as an example, the
Mm.
popular Walmart is a family business. Samsung, where we have all their TV screens and appliances on our homes, it's a family business. Nando's is a family business. We have family business in Nigeria, but what we do not have yet is sustainable family businesses. And some of these tips I'm giving here and there are the things that these other jurisdictions are doing that we're not aware of. It comes to the legal structure, it comes to the tax affairs as well, it comes to the governance structure, both in the company and in the family. It comes down to even how you reward yourself as an individual within the business. There's so much sweat equity most times when you start businesses. People thrive, they sweat, they don't reward themselves because they feel this business has to go. They're passionate about it. But there are disadvantages to that. At the time you've grown the business, and you then feel that, oh, maybe I want to even bring in new investors in this business. I need more capital, and I'm going to exchange it for shares in the business. I give my shares out. How is the business valued at that point in time? All your expenses have not gone in. The right assets have not been properly valued. How do you then say that this is the proper value of this business? You may just be shortchanging yourself at the time when you're going to transfer the reins of that business to another investor, and then you underpay yourself. So some of the things and questions that need to be asked is, I, as a person that owns this business, how am I even paying myself? And when you start to ask those questions as well, you must also ask yourself at every point in time, what are the tax implications? If I pay myself a salary in a business compared to if I pay myself a dividend in a business, do you know that I'm richer when I get the salary? And this is the reason why. Simply because I'm not hit with the significant tax burden of the corporate entity after the dividend has been collected. As an individual, I'll get my salary, I probably will pay 19% tax in Nigeria. But if I say, oh, let me accommodate all the expenses, anything that's left, I'll give myself a dividend. What would then happen is that you will pay taxes first as a corporate at 32% in Nigeria. The 68% balance is what you would then be left with to distribute to shareholders. Of that 68%, government will collect another 10%. In total, you would have lost about 52% just trying to pay the corporate tax and trying to pay the withholding tax before you paid yourself a dividend, compared to the 19% you could have suffered if you paid yourself a salary. These are some of the things that you then have to consider in addition to valuation. The next thing after this as well, having talked about even the valuation, you now need to even ask yourself. Sometimes I see instances where companies, I mentioned plethora of companies, and you find people are so quick, entrepreneurial, very active. They want to expand beyond borders, and they're beginning to set up companies also in other jurisdictions. And then somewhere along the line, you're smart. We're all smart. Someone says, "Oh, maybe we should transfer this money to an entity in a country that is a tax haven, perhaps like the BVI." So a lot of companies set up in countries like that so that they don't pay further taxes. They transfer the money there. It looks all well and good. But recall, like about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we had the Panama
Yeah.
paper leak. We had all these leaks where all these companies were exposed. And then over time, countries have started to sign agreements where they're exchanging information and sharing information on individuals and companies like this. What they're seeking to do is to collect back the taxes that they probably lost because of that your transfer. What we call this is a misprice in your transfer of assets to another entity. And we studied this under a concept called transfer pricing. If you have so many companies, they are called related parties. If you haven't considered how to price goods properly, how to price the transfers and the cash you're transferring from one entity to another, you get yourself into a big dispute with the tax authorities. And very easily, you lose about 30% of your wealth just because you hadn't thought about it in advance. And the tax rate in Nigeria is good, though. Tax rates in other countries, they are hovering around 50% in the US. The another thing I think I should even mention is around planning for your retirement as well. And you can actually start that now. So some of the issues that we see and some of the concerns that we have raised as well is, how do I make sure that I'm not exposed to these humongous tax rates or bills in other jurisdictions as I'm expanding rapidly? And some of it can be within your planning before and planning after. There's something we call a trust that suggests that you can set up a trust to hold your assets now, rather than when you pass and then have to go through the court and through the probate process, which takes its own levy as well. So the trust, when you set it up, you're basically saying, I'm moving the legal ownership of this asset, whether it is a company, whether it is real estate. You move it to another person to handle on your behalf. And then that person gives you the benefits thereon under something we call a trust arrangement. So a lot of trust vehicles are used, not only in Nigeria, but even outside. A plethora of them are used to protect wealth and preserve wealth. Why do they do that? There are reasons around even trying to avoid that probate. So we don't have to go to court at the point where the person passes on, and we start to ask questions on how we would administer those assets. What we simply do is, when we transfer to this trust, we don't have any transfer cost, or there are minimal transfer costs, and it saves us that rainy day. But it also helps to start to identify who your successor will be while that trust is handling it. And you also have the benefit of external advice. One thing it also does for us, especially depending on where you gave birth to your children. So a lot of Nigerians like to go abroad. They give birth to their children in the US, but they don't know that that also has its consequences. So when you give birth to a child in the US, the child automatically becomes a US citizen. They're exposed to taxation on a worldwide basis. Now, once you're transferring assets to those kids, whether in your lifetime or whether at the time when you pass on, there'll always be something we call an inheritance tax or an estate tax. And the taxes can be huge. In the US, it's about 40%, and it's higher depending on the state that you are in. What kind of structure can avoid that? There's something we call a non-grantor trust, foreign trust, where you set up that trust in those jurisdictions just so you can avoid it. In every jurisdiction, it differs, whether it's the UK or the US. In the UK, it might just be an insurance that you're going to put in place or a proper will. But these questions need to be asked at the time you're doing all this and making this decision, so that at the time of retirement, you're not overly exposed and your children are not overly exposed. So I think it comes down to your structures, governance, tax, and estate planning, and all of these things that we've mentioned.
You know what, Esiri, so many things to talk about, and we are pressed for time. It's almost 12 o'clock and we've got to go. But I think I'm going to promise our viewers that we'll have this session again, because you brought in a lot of dimensions. That was why I allowed you to speak for a while, because you brought in the dimension of having a will, you brought in a dimension of even people planning for their retirement and not having the mentality that, oh, the children I have given birth to will take care of me. I think that stuff is changing, or we should change that mentality. So quite a whole lot which you've brought in. Also the tax dimension. I like also the part which you brought in now, which is about, for Nigerians, especially those that can afford, I don't know if we still have middle class here in the country, but for those that can afford it, they go have their children in other jurisdictions. In the US, Canada is raining and all of that. How do you, because they want a better future for their children. So how do we have all of this and plan so that, in essence, our wealth is not just for us as a person, but we can also transfer it across generations. Esiri, we're going to do this show again. I'll talk with you soon so that we can expand on it. But I want to say thank you very much for coming. And I'll see you soon. Have a lovely, lovely day.
You too, Nancy. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye. All right, I've been speaking with Esiri Agbeyi, who is a partner at PwC and also the family business leader with PricewaterhouseCoopers. We've been talking about generational wealth, how to build it. You can see it has so many layers, but like I promised you, we will do this again sometime. So thank you all for being a part of the show today. Don't forget that you can join us on all our social media platforms. You can also go to our YouTube channel right now. You're watching, go on the YouTube icon. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can see other shows that we've had, other topics that will be of interest, and you should also gain knowledge from. We'll see you all on Monday, God willing. Be the best you can be and be that change that you want to see. Bye for now. I am Nancy Naji. Bye.